Hello, everyone. This is Tommy at World at War Comics, and today we got another amazing guest for you. Today we have Mr. Jeremy Adams. That's right, Jeremy Adams from DC Comics. He's a current writer on Green Lantern. He had that amazing run on the Flash with the Wally West and the West family. But yeah, he is on today, and we're going to talk everything comic books leading up to Green Lantern and what his plans are for Mr. Hal Jordan. But before we get into that, if you could give us a like and a subscribe, that really helps out the channel. Remember, this podcast is brought to you by Cien Chilies. That's right, Cien Chilies, the best hot sauce that you will ever taste. It's CIENCHILES.com. Go to Cien Chilies and use comics at checkout, and you will save 15%. All right, without further ado, here's Mr. Jeremy Adams and I. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to World at War Comics podcast. Today, we have special guest, Mr. Jeremy Adams. Jeremy, thanks for joining, man. It's so good to have you. I know you've been doing a lot of these. I saw you on the podcast of OA, which Myron and they're good guys, man. So I thought, man,
they're great. Yeah. No, I love doing podcasts and stuff and just trying to get the word out to buy comics and wanting everybody to just get back into it. It's weird because growing up, like comics were everywhere. They were at bookstores, they were at grocery stores, and now it seems harder to get comics. You have to go to a local comic book shop if you're lucky enough to have one near you, but it's fun. This has been a dream of mine to do comics, so I'm trying to keep that dream alive.
I think you're doing pretty good.
Thanks.
Let's talk about that dream, Jeremy. When did that dream really start? How young were you when you were really introduced into comics?
So my dad had drawn some comics. He had drawn some DC comics in the 70s. And then my parents were divorced, and I found out much later that he had drawn some Captain Atom in the 80s. And some Alpha Flight. He had done like 2 issues of Alpha Flight, I think, but not very many comics. But I was introduced to comics so early, and it was definitely the psychological aspect of it is obviously I was trying to find stuff to communicate with my dad about, and just my dad was into this, so I was into this, so very, very early on. In fact, my brother and I had a shared comic collection up until right before junior high. We had like a share. It was mostly X-Men. And then my brother totally screwed me out of my share of the comics. we had X-Men, but we also had, like, peculiar enough, like Spider-Ham comics, like the original Spider-Ham run. And I distinctly remember, he's my older brother, and he's like, Jeremy, you could have a complete run of Spider-Ham. I mean, why do you need this X-Men 100?
I'll take the X-Men off your hands, right?
And he was like, they're not even ordered. We have like 101, 105, and I had no idea. And so I abdicated my my ownership of that. And I had a great Spider-Ham collection. And then immediately when I realized he had screwed me, I started collecting pretty hard, and I was definitely into quantity over quality. I still to this day, my taste level is terrible, but like, we didn't have a comic book. We had a brief moment in time where there was probably 6 months where we had a comic book store where I lived, but generally it was either antique stores, used bookstores, or like, spinner racks. And so I have up in my closet like the complete New Universe collection, and if there were like weird, what were the other ones? The Impact comics, and I would pick up and I would play comic poker with my friends. Too, and it drove me nuts because my one friend, he had just bought tons of Disney and Archie comics, and he would be like, I would like throw in an X-Force or something. And he'd be like, here's an Archie. I'm like, that's not even a comic. Like, I was such a snob. I was like, if it's not a superhero, I don't want to read it. So it's been a lifelong thing. My room was just, the wall was covered in what I thought were cool number ones. But it is a weird thing. It is both surprising and not surprising. Like, everybody that knows me from growing up were like, well, of course this is where you would end up, but I came through it backwards. I came through it through television and movies, and I had always been trying to get to comics. And I think I pitched my first comic 10 years ago. and it was Mike Martz was running. He was the editor at the Bat office at DC, and I had met Mike on some other occasion,
Mm-hmm.
and he let me pitch on a Batwing comic, and I didn't get it. I got close.
Yeah.
That was my first opportunity, and I was like, "Oh, I'm so close!" And so since then, it was like I would
Yeah.
constantly try to figure out and meet
Yeah.
people and see if I can get closer. And I always had near misses
Yeah.
until
Yeah.
future state stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So did you grow up more of a DC person or a Marvel person?
I would say Marvel,
Mm-hmm.
but at the time, I never really thought of it that much.
Yeah.
I found myself reading more Marvel stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly, part of it was because DC would always, it seemed like it would. I couldn't figure out their continuity as much.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
would always read. I would read Bat books. I'd read any martial art related DC book.
Yeah.
And there was an age when, like, Chuck Dixon was running the Bat office, and so I
Yeah.
was obsessed with Nightwing and Robin because I love
Yeah.
that they would dip into each other. The
Yeah.
Birds
Yeah.
of Prey book was good. The Cassandra uh, uh, Batgirl book was like the best. I love
Mm-hmm.
that book.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm trying to think some other. They always had really good. They would always catch me up in the events that they had. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I remember Millennium and Invasion, and like
Yeah.
I was all in. No clue what's going on. The only exception, the rule. I mean, but I would do a lot of Marvel, but
Yeah.
the Justice League International
Mm.
just wrecked my brain. I love that book.
Yeah. Yeah. That was great.
And Len Wein's run on Blue Beetle. I was such a Ted Cord Blue Beetle guy.
Yeah.
And then it was a different age. It was like
Yeah.
Jeff Johns showed up, and what he did with Green Lantern was,
Mm-hmm.
it was crazy. He
Yeah.
expanded
That's
the
awesome.
universe in such a massive fashion.
Yeah.
And between him and then Tomasi doing the Green Lantern Corps, which I was obsessed with as well.
Yeah. I wonder if that could ever come back again. That
Um,
was
yeah, who knows?
uniquely popular, what's
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I thought about this a lot because people are
Yeah.
like, "Oh, comics are dying and stuff," but I'm like, there's so many more comics to choose
Yeah.
from now. They're
There
not
really
just two companies.
Yeah.
It's like there's all these indie companies and creator-owned books and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I wonder if I would love to see the dollar amount. I would love to see if the
Yeah.
same dollar amount's being spent.
Mm-hmm.
There's a feeling that it's dying, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
I also think Kickstarter,
Yeah,
Indiegogo, I mean that's really hard to understand how much comics are coming through those
yeah,
avenues as well. And so yeah, I think just think it's spread over
right.
more areas to purchase comics. I mean, I'm on Kickstarter all the time trying to find,
Yeah.
Something pretty cool that looks really interesting. And I
Oh,
think a
dude,
lot of
I ended up
cool.
donated to there was like a Rambo comic,
Oh.
and the thing that put me over the top was you get your own dog tags. I was like, click.
That's all it took, Jeremy. That's all it took, man.
I'm such a sucker. It's hilarious.
Yeah. That's hilarious, man. So
Yeah.
you did you grow up a writer? Were you writing from a really early age, taking stories and trying to put it on paper?
Yeah, I mean, I have like my own comics that I made in third grade,
Yeah, that's
like that I
awesome. Yeah.
drew and whatever. I posted them at one point. They're really silly. But I didn't know, like I love to write,
Yeah.
but in junior high, I remember for a class assignment, I wrote something and the whole class laughed. And it was such a intense high.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, well, that's great. And
Yeah.
so me and my buddy Austin, who's now a very successful novelist, he and I were really into like Stephen King, and
Mm-hmm.
Dragonlance was really big for me. And so we were writing, and I had some really great teachers that encouraged that. But I never thought of it as a career. I never thought
Yeah.
that you could do that. I didn't think film and television career, probably still not a viable career. But I remember reading in the way I got to college was so by the seat of my pants. I didn't even think about it. And I remember thinking like, oh, I guess I'll be a U.S. Marshal. I was like, oh, I'll just,
Yeah.
that's what I'll do.
Yeah.
And I'm in orientation at University of Arizona before school even starts. And somebody from the film department came up, and I'm looking around like, there's a film department? Go to school for film? And I immediately just
Yeah.
went, okay, that's what I'm doing. Told my mom right then, I'm like, I'm not going to be a U.S. Marshal. I'm going to go into film. And she's
Yeah.
like, yeah, okay, you know.
All right,
Uh,
whatever, Jeremy.
yeah. So I started down that road, and filmmaking and
Yeah.
movies and television go hand to hand with screenwriting and
Right. Yeah.
storytelling. And um, I think screenwriting in particular, writing in particular, became less. I had no money, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
It's so much. It's so much less expensive to write than it
Yeah.
is to actually, you know, make a movie.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So it was like, oh, I can do this. And
Yeah.
I was so full of uh fear and
Yeah.
imposter syndrome still to this day.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
kind of like I turn in a script to my editor and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, you know, I'm just completely worried they're
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
everything I put on paper, you know.
Yeah. So you got into movies right away. Was it first with DC? Because I know we had the Super Sons. You did a couple different animated movies, but
Yeah,
did you
well,
do anything before that?
so I came out to LA in 99, and it took
Hmm.
me probably over 11 or 12 years to get my first credit. I mean, it
Oh,
took me a
okay.
long time. And my
Yeah.
first credit was on Green Lantern, the animated
Yeah.
series.
Yeah.
So my mentor, boss Jim Creek, had given me that job. And so I worked on that. And then there was like 3 years of, well, it was like a couple years after that, I worked on a show called Monsuno. And then
Mm.
it was, again, I mean, it's such a feast
Yeah.
or famine
Yeah.
scenario. We had a baby, and I was staying at home, and I was ghostwriting, and I was a stay-at-home dad, and I
Yeah.
was just doing like odd jobs,
Hmm.
and really discouraged. And then I
Yeah.
started getting jobs on Justice League Action because Jim
Hmm.
had gone over to Warner Brothers. He started doing Justice League Action, and it's a great show. If anybody hasn't seen it, you should check it
Hmm.
out.
Yeah.
Um, and I had done like 4 of those episodes, and that started me on kind of the Warner Brothers
Hmm.
track. So I had done those, and then I did a Lego DC superhero girls movie, and that did really well. And so I did another one of those, and that introduced me to Lego. And I've had a long partnership with Lego after
That's
that. And so
awesome.
I've done after that I did like 4 Lego superhero movies that are really fun. There's like
I
a
think an Aquaman one you did, right?
I did a Flash one, an Aquaman one, a
Yeah.
Shazam one, and a Batman one, and
That's awesome.
they're really family friendly,
Yeah.
silly. We got away with so many incredibly hilarious inside jokes. This acting is just
Yeah.
excellent. And then I started moving into more adult stuff. So I
Yeah.
started doing you know, I'd done some Scooby Doo stuff, but it was like the Mortal Kombat. I
Yeah.
did this Batman Soul of the Dragon movie with Bruce Timm, which was one of my favorite things I've done,
Yeah.
and Super Sons. And then I went to go work on Supernatural. And then I came back and did some more, you
Yeah.
know, because COVID hit and animation
Yeah.
was the only thing going. So
Yeah.
luckily people dug that. And then I co-wrote a JSA World War II
Hmm.
movie with my friend Megan.
Yeah.
And then I did a little segment in the new War World movie, a DC War World. And it's funny, it's like I've done a lot of DC stuff. Like if you look at my IMDb is a mess, and I love it. Like I always want
Yeah.
people to go, this is bizarre. He's done all this weird stuff. And then because of the animation, I got put on a list that Dan Didio wanted to hire a bunch of animation writers to write comics and for
Yeah.
5G. And I
Yeah.
thought, oh, this is happening. And then he got let go, and I was like, oh, it's not happening. I mean, it was that quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Her name was still on a list, and Mike Cotton, who was an editor there at the time, called me up, and one of my friends, Tim, was
Yeah.
like he went to my friend Tim's like, hey, you know, there's these names on this list, and Tim's like, oh, Jeremy's great.
Yeah.
And so he asked me to do a DC 1 million Black Adam like backup
Hmm.
in the Suicide Squad future state. And I did that, and that's when I created Gold Beetle and worked with Fernando Passarin. And I
Yeah.
didn't know what I was doing, but I was just like, I can't believe they're letting me do this.
Yeah.
And then I did a backup in Philip Kennedy Johnson's World at War future state.
Yeah.
And after those, I just get a call one day after that was like, hey, you got any ideas for the Flash? And I'm like,
Yeah.
bro, I'm a man of a certain age that has been reading comics for a long time.
Yeah.
I've got ideas from now until the end
Yeah.
of eternity, you know? And
That's
so
awesome.
I pitched them the quantum leap idea, and they were like, better what we got. So they just kind of hand Flash over to me. And
that's awesome.
I mean, he had told me most people do not last longer than a year.
Yeah.
I think because Warner Brothers was in such peculiar shape.
Yeah.
And it was being bought out and it was sold, it was bought out, and editors would leave and come in. The fact that I was turning things in on time, and the fact that the fan base was just so kind and receptive to what I was doing, it kind of prolonged my run on the book. And until eventually they're like, hey, we got to move on. And I was like, oh, you know.
Yeah. So how does that work? I mean, how do they decide that you need to move on? Because that's a question I think a lot of fans have, right? Because they really love that Flash run. They love what you did with Wally and the family. And so everyone's kind of married into this Jeremy Adams writing, and then all of a sudden it's gone, right? And so they're like, well, how do they make that decision? Like, what is the Warner Brothers or the editors? How do they come up with, we need Jeremy Adams somewhere else?
So I think there's a couple things. Like, number one, we were doing pretty good in terms of numbers. At least that's what I was told.
Yeah.
And it was like, the reason they told me is like, hey, we want to go in a new tonal direction. The reality is they're doing a whole new thing of Dawn of DCU, and there's a little bit of like, hey, we're reshuffling and we're giving number ones to everything. And of course, if you give a number one to something, it sells better too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I had also heard they were obviously soliciting ideas for Flash, and I heard that Cy Spurrier's pitch was unbelievable, and they were like, oh my gosh, this is going to be great, we're going to do this. But it was a drastic tonal shift from what I was doing. So I get it. Like, they, you know, these are not my toys, these are not
for sure
my characters. I was emotionally invested.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? So it was definitely hard for me. And I think the hardest part was like, you know, it just feeds into that imposter syndrome of feeling like, oh, I thought I was doing good work. And I don't think I wasn't doing good work. Like, having some perspective, I don't think I wasn't doing good work. I think it was just that, hey, we want to do this thing. If I wasn't doing good work, they wouldn't have offered me Green Lantern, right?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, but I was mopey about it. It was such a childish thing. I mean, I was just like, whatever. You know, and it's like, and Paul was like, hey, we want to give you Green Lantern. I was like, I don't know, maybe. And I had called up Jeff Johns, and I said, Jeff, you know, they're taking me off the Flash, but they want me to do Green Lantern. And he was like, and that was the energy I needed. To be like, oh, Jeff thinks I can do it. You know, like, if Jeff thinks I can do it, then I can do it, you know? And so we were going up to my in-laws' house, and it was like a 3-hour trip. And before the trip, I didn't know what I was going to do. And then by the end of the trip, I knew exactly the story I wanted to tell. And it was weirdly based on a pitch that I had like a couple years ago for Green Lantern. So I was very excited about it. But you know, in terms of like the moving around, I actually don't think it's personal.
No, I wouldn't think so either. But
I don't know. You know, but all I can do is, and people were all like, you know, I was getting calls like, because I posted this thing about being sad about it. And people were like, oh, he's angry and mad, and I was like, no, I'm sad. But like, I'm sad because I was having such a good time. It would be like you going, you have to leave the party. You know? It's like, but I don't want to leave the party, you know.
I'm not done having fun yet.
It's like, I'm having fun. Of course I'm gonna be sad, you know. It wasn't, but I'm eternally grateful. And
absolutely.
I got to do some crazy fun stuff. Flash lends itself to like a lot of fun. It's different. I think Green Lantern right now, at least right now, because I feel like I'm picking up off of Jeff Thorne's like kind of like high concept sci-fi run, right? That I'm kind of doing this thing, and it feels a little more serious for what I'm used to with Wally. Because the Flash just is, you can go anywhere. You know, so it's different, and the immense pressure I felt doing Green Lantern was like, I mean, it was all me putting it on myself, you know. Oh, he's is he a one-trick pony? Can he only write the Flash and that's it? You know, I was terrified. I was really terrified. I'm always terrified. I'm still terrified.
I think that's a good place to be, though, right? It's a humbling place to be, and I
Yeah,
think that's healthy, to be honest.
I hope so.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I
I mean,
think
I
as
you know
fans,
what
we
it
notice
is
that in
like,
you.
yeah, it's like when you're,
Hmm.
uh, I told my wife on our second date, I'm probably gonna be really poor the rest of our life. I'm pursuing this dream that does
Yeah,
not lend itself
yeah,
to making money. And despite what anybody might think, comics don't
yeah, yeah,
pay particularly, you know what I mean? You can't
yeah, yeah,
survive on just not in
yeah,
Los Angeles, you can.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
so but I because I lived my life not doing it and now I'm
yeah,
doing it and I love it and I love it so much that I don't ever want to stop doing it.
yeah,
And I get so much satisfaction out of it and being able to work with these amazing people that they're all creative and
yeah,
meeting all these amazing people,
yeah, yeah,
like and just all the people that are working in the industry now, everybody's been incredibly nice. I haven't met anybody that's been like, I hate you.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I was scared meeting like Tom King. I thought, oh, he's gonna
yeah,
see I like break my neck because
yeah,
I retcon Heroes in Crisis or whatever, but
yeah, yeah,
it was like he couldn't be nicer. And
yeah,
like I think he's a nerd like all of us that's
yeah,
just kind of like having fun doing what they're doing.
for sure, yeah.
So
Absolutely. Now, I follow you on Instagram and I see all your posts with your family and stuff
yeah.
like that, which I think is amazing and it makes you super relatable. How much of your family life did you bring into the Flash? Because the Flash family, there's a lot of things. And I think that's why so many people loved it. Is
Yeah.
there's something that you can relate to if you're a father or a mother and you
Yeah.
have a
Yeah.
family. You know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
so much that's going on that we're like, yeah, that happens in my life as
Yeah.
well,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How much did you bring in of your family life into
Oh,
the Flash?
so
Yeah,
much.
yeah,
I mean, because he was a guy, Wally has always been the way that I was writing Wally was much more like me,
yeah,
and he's a little more carefree maybe,
yeah,
and I try to be empathetic like
yeah,
Wally is, but
yeah.
he's married to this dynamic woman that's much smarter than he is, which is
Right,
exactly what I did.
for
And
sure. We all do that.
yeah,
Jeremy, we all do that.
and then I had two kids and he had two kids, and it was just, and I had written one of the issues with my daughter, and so much of that stuff was just ripped from the headlines of my life. And
That's awesome.
that was what was peculiar, because I found myself, as much as I love writing Wally and as much as I love writing Linda and I love writing their kind of romance, I kept finding myself um, really getting invested in the kids.
Yeah, yeah,
And then when Maxine showed up, I was like, holy cow, I love this.
yeah,
I love what this is, this kind of like Incredibles meets Fantastic Four kind of vibe going forward. And it was also just like, comic books have a tendency to get stuck in place when it
yeah.
comes to character growth.
Hmm.
And it was just and you hear it all the time. You hear
Yeah.
people say like, oh, you can't write married people, you can't write
Mhm.
kids. And I was like, well, I think you can, and I think you can have fun doing it,
Hmm.
but it was also trying to make a book that was a safe place for anybody to read.
Yeah,
Like if
yeah.
people could come into a store, somebody could go, "Oh, your kid can read The Flash,"
Absolutely, yeah,
and that's how I grew up reading. Like
yeah.
you can read the Dark Phoenix saga, and except for a questionable Hellfire gal, where uh, it's pretty like
Yeah,
it's fun. There's
yeah,
stakes. It's
yeah,
exciting, and I
yeah,
was trying to do something that anybody could. It wasn't
definitely.
going to be overtly sexualized or overtly violent or anything like that. It was just going to be fun adventures and
Hmm.
with a family, and I really enjoyed building that out. I just felt like there was I didn't see anybody doing it. Now it's great because it seems like DC has embraced. It's
Hmm.
like you've got the Arrow family and you've got the
Yeah,
Superman family, and everybody's got a family now.
everyone's got a family. Yeah,
Yeah. So that helps me when it comes to Green Lantern,
yeah,
because I think the shift of focus has gone on the next generation of heroes a lot.
yeah. Hmm.
Wally, Nightwing, etc.
Right.
And so this is a chance to kind of like go, and you'll see that a lot in issue 4 when Barry shows up. There's
Hmm.
a little bit of like, well, what's our place in this universe now? What's our place as the old timers in a way, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
So you're writing the Flash. You get the news that you're going to be moving over to Green Lantern. I mean, how many more stories did you kind of already have for Wally? And then how much time did you get to create a story for Green Lantern and how? Like, did you already kind of have an idea? Like, if I ever got on Green Lantern,
I
or
had I had a pitch for Green Lantern like 2 years ago, maybe, I think.
okay,
That was, but it was very, it was very like it was very glossy. It wasn't. The main thing I said was that, like, how it was supposed to be Hal and John were quarantined on Earth, and that was the impetus of it. So when Paul came to me and said, "Hey, we want to do a very Earth-centric Green Lantern, Hal Jordan," I was like, "Oh, I kind of already have a skeleton of something like that." But between that 3-hour drive from my home to my in-laws, I knew what it was. I knew exactly what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
It's a little out there in some ways, in some respects.
Yeah.
But after reading Jeff Thorne's run, it was also like I felt like there was all these cool launching off points where it was like the Guardians were gone and the United Planets are there, and there's a giant ball of source, and a lantern could change his powers. Like, it was like, wait, what? Huh? And it was like no one was following up on it. And somebody had said, oh, you could just write it that everything's back to normal. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. First of all, I'm a super nerd that like wants to know how that happens. There'll
be Green Lantern fans everywhere going, "Oh my gosh, man, there's a gap." Like,
yeah. I'm like, the gap is like where you want to be, and so that's kind of the story I'm telling. The only tragedy with it is it's the same thing when I was doing the Flash. I was like, oh, I gotta wait every month. You know what I mean? Like I was like, no, I want to do like 3 times. I want to do it weekly, And I pretty much browbeat them into doing that in the Flash. So maybe I can do it on Green Lantern. Except I don't. I kind of want to give Zermanico time because he's just such an incredible artist.
Incredible.
He's ridiculous. He's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I could write poop and he would draw. It would just be better.
The most beautiful poop you've
ever seen. You'd weep at that poop. But like,
he's incredible.
The other thing I did was I just realized I had this iPad that was like underneath my what's it called? Chair.
You've been looking for it for a while too?
I was like, oh, it's underneath my chair. I hope I didn't destroy it. Anyways, with the Flash, I had about probably another 10-issue story.
Okay.
There were other things I wanted to do, but like there is this and you see it at the end of my run with Omega Bandman and Gold Beetle and Wally, and some time has passed, and it was their journey home from the Palace of Eternity, and I had what I thought was a pretty fun idea about work, which was cool. And then I was also building up this kids superhero team in the background, where I had the young Super Sons from another universe, and I kind of, in my head, I don't know if it was because I was watching Dawson's Creek at the time, I wanted like Irie, John, and Damian to have like a love triangle, but and then I had Mr. Terrific's kid and Jay, and so I was just having fun, just kind of because at the time, and like Young Justice they were all kind of grown up. I did not know that Jeff was going to bring back like 15 kids in Stargirl. And I was like, oh, okay, so,
his Stargirl run was amazing too.
Yeah, it's cool. Anything Jeff touches is pretty great.
I love it. Him and Mark Waid and yourself are probably my 3 favorite DC writers right now.
Well, that's kind. Mark Waid, I am such a nerd. He was doing a signing at a comic book store not too far from me. I had never met him, and I was on Twitter and I saw that he was doing, and I like, oh my God. I like grabbed my keys. I'm like, honey, I gotta go. And I ran out the door and drove over and oh, hi, Mr. Waid. Oh, my name is Jeremy Adams. And he was like, oh, I really enjoy your book. And I was like, oh. And then to come to find out, he lives like 2 blocks away from me. So we've had.
You did a signing not too long ago with him, and who else was it?
It was Jeff and Mark. Yeah.
I know I wanted to get out there, but that's about 2.5 hours from my house, but I wanted to get there so bad.
It was one of those, which one is not like the other? Because it was like, It was like Jeff, Mark, so it would be like people would come in with wagons with like omnibuses for like Jeff and Mark, and I'd be like, "Oh, you could sign this one, Jeremy." Like,
Yeah.
thanks,
He
thank
just
you.
got started before you, Jeremy. That's all,
Yeah, well, I know, but and also I'm just like a super nerd. Like I was at a convention the other day, and Mark Silvestri had a booth like three down from me, and his line was so long it cut in front of my booth. But people were like, "Oh, are you?" I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" I'm like,
yeah.
"A Cyber Force, who's
Yeah.
bringing X-Men, whatever, like I'm one of those people. I'm like, I
Yeah,
got a lot
yeah.
of print from Mark. I was like, I'm a big fan, like it's terrible. It's terrible.
He's such a like a quiet, humble, just amazing human being, man. I really enjoy him too. Yeah.
Yeah. All of them.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, honestly, I had heard horror stories about certain people, and then I just never have experienced that.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's been a blast. I feel very pumped about it all,
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So we get into Green Lantern, Jeremy, and then right away we get into Night Terrors.
Yeah.
Like, how
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, we want you to take over this book, and then you're creating a story for it. And they're like, oh, by the way, after issue 1, we need to do Night Terrors. How far does that throw you off? Or after issue 2, how far does that throw you off? Or does it throw you off at all? Because the Night Terrors was still related to the story I
Yeah.
felt that you were telling, but it did bring in obviously everything that was happening within Night Terrors.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, my first reaction wasn't like, ugh. It
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
like that. It was like, how do I relate it? It's like I'm just so excited to be here.
Yeah, yeah.
And the fact that like they're letting me be part of crossovers, I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm such a leader. Like, yeah. I mean, the only time that it slightly annoys me,
Yeah.
it was like we had to do the War for Earth 3,
Mm-hmm.
and Flash had to tie into that. And I remember thinking like I was irritated because I had to take my last 2 issues of the Gem World saga thing and
Mm-hmm.
put it into one. And
No.
I feel like it was a little rushed in that regard.
Yeah.
But regardless,
Mm-hmm.
that was the first time I did like kind of a crossover. So I was stoked because that meant I was doing something new in comics that I hadn't done. And so
Yeah.
I love crossovers. The key for me would always be, the best way to put it is trying to think if it was Captain America or Iron Man during Fall of the Mutants. There was like Armor Wars was going on like at the
Mm-hmm.
same time or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a crossover. It was either when Steve Rogers was the US agent and he came in. Anyways, there was a big fight, but it had to do with the book it was in. It was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that event trickled in, so you got a taste of it, but
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't like, to find out what happened, you have to go, and
Yeah.
there's a little bit of that with Green Lantern because I wanted to be like, oh, go check out the Night Terrors, but I wanted it to pick up right after issue 2, so
Yeah.
that you knew it was going to be integral to my story. And what was great about it, it gave me this kind of weird runway to retell Hal's origin story in a weird way.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
even though it wasn't correct,
Mm.
it was like there were little bits of his character. And I always feel like, especially when I started writing Wally, like it took me a couple issues to kind of get the voice I wanted to write with
Right. Yeah.
for Wally, or in this
Mm-hmm.
case Hal. And also it gave me a chance to, like, there was things like fans told me about Hal being, like, Hal's mom being Jewish, and I was like,
Yeah.
what, really? Oh, he's Jewish? I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so it was
Yeah.
kind of a cool thing to touch on, and especially in my head, I'm like, that's funny that he is Jewish, but he was also the spirit of vengeance for the Abrahamic God in
Right.
comics. Like, I was like, that's kind of cool. I think that's something to touch on. And then it was also like, I was like, my through line was like, Hal isn't going to be afraid of this thing. Like, he doesn't
No.
process fear the same way. So this was a good chance for people to understand that the way I look at Hal is not like, it's a very classic sense. Like, he's fearless in that regard.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, willpower was everything with him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that's one thing that I think a lot of Green Lantern fans noticed through Night Terrors is Hal's reaction to
Right.
insomnia and everything that's going on was much different than other characters that were going
Yeah.
through it. And it had to be, right? Because
Right.
that is what the ring does for you, right?
Right. Well, I mean, that was my thought. I mean, I'm glad
Yeah.
everybody like came across it because I thought the bait and switch was I thought, oh, maybe people would be upset in the first issue
Yeah.
because it was kind of a setup for the second issue. In the first issue, the way I couched it was that this guy couldn't get a handle on Hal's fears, you know?
Yeah.
And what was funny was like people were like, oh, parallax or whatever. And I'm like, yeah. But that's just because he's gonna kick everybody's ass in the second issue. Like, you know,
Exactly.
like it was immediately that moment where he's like, why are you smiling? And he's just
Yeah.
like, oh man, you came to the wrong place and the
Wrong.
wrong dude, you know? And it was
Yeah.
like that to me was like you know, I didn't know exactly what was going on in other books. I just knew that Hal was going, if this is fear, this is the one dude. That's like going to the Flash and saying, like, you know, I'm gonna outrun you. And it's just like,
Yeah. Yeah.
what? No,
No.
you're not. You know, like, so that was really fun. That was really
That's
fun
awesome.
to kind of do you know, and Eduardo Pansica did a lot of the art and this kind of like Evil Dead moments
Yeah.
and just also just be able to like have a weird warped lens of his origin and
Mhm.
Alex Segura did a great job of talking about Sinestro and what's going on
Yeah.
with Sinestro mentally, especially as we push forward into the last bit of this first arc with Hal
Yeah.
and Sinestro. So
Yeah. So that's a great segue into a question about how are you, Alex, and what's his name? Phillips on John Stewart. How often are you coming together and are your stories all going to be related?
well, Alex had
Or
just done the
crossover.
backup. Yeah, Alex had just done the backup for Sinestro.
Okay.
So we had got on the phone and talked about that, and then he went away, and he's much
Mhm.
smarter than I am, which is great. Philip and
Kennedy,
I,
yeah.
yeah. So we've been getting on the horn and talking.
Yeah.
So really, his story doesn't really have to do with my story yet,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
we can both see the collision course of our stories intersecting at some point.
Yeah.
Again, he's a hyper intelligent person that is much more thoughtful than me. You know, like I'm just like, yeah, that'd be cool, but let's make a joke too. You know, like
Yeah.
he's got this ability to world build, and
Yeah.
so he's very deferential, and I'm trying to be deferential to him, and
Yeah.
I just see what he does, and I'm always in awe. So but we have a pretty good relationship. So I'm very
Yeah.
excited about what's going to come down the pipe because his idea for John is so clever, and it's such a great way to also not necessarily interact with current continuity and what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Um, that, but you know, I was like, hey, this is what I want to do, and he's very receptive to that sort of thing down the
Yeah.
line. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited this time next year. It's like Green Lantern, the Green Lantern universe is going to look vastly different.
Yeah. And I think every Green Lantern fan is extremely excited about that because there has been this like gap in time where we just
Yeah.
didn't have a whole lot. Like once in a while there'd be a one shot and
Right.
you're just like, man, what are they doing with Green Lantern? I mean, I feel like he's an A-list character, and
Yeah.
yet DC, for whatever reason, and obviously none of the fans know, just weren't doing a whole lot with him for a while. And then when we heard that you were going on, and then Philip Kennedy with John
Yeah.
Stewart, and then there's a story floating around with
Yeah.
Sinestro, and then you got James Gunn talking about
Yeah.
an HBO series where
Yeah.
you're going to have, like, all of a sudden we had
Yeah.
nothing and now there's all kinds of
Yeah.
things going on. So like emotionally there's like this joy, like we're hoping that nothing changes because there's a lot
Yeah.
going on with Green Lantern right
Yeah.
now. It's exciting.
I'm super excited about it because I think the Dawn of DCU was a really great way to get people invested in like the different little franchises. Because
Yeah.
look at the Flash. I mean, like
Yeah.
now it's not only is there Flash, I'm doing a Jay Garrick miniseries. They're going to do
Yeah.
an Avery and Ace like
Crazy.
series.
Yeah.
You know, so it just seems like, oh wow, there's a lot of stuff happening. And again, it all comes down to sales. Like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, there is a
Exactly.
number, and when and
Yeah.
it and we this is why I try to encourage people because I don't I don't like people that pirate stuff. I don't like them pirating stuff, and
Yeah.
try to explain like the difference between a book being canceled is so slim. It's
Yeah.
just so slim.
Yeah.
I know comics are expensive, but it's just so slim, the margin between, oh, this book is doing great, and then next week, well, we're canceling this book,
Yeah.
because you can
Yeah.
tell, like, if it gets under a certain amount, they're like, well, it's not going to come back from that amount.
Yeah. Yeah.
Generally, I say that
Right.
in a very general term, but
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
some people respond to stuff, and I just hope people respond to, I'm always nervous. I'm always nervous that,
Yeah.
like, I want to do right by Green Lantern fans and Hal fans and the universe of it, and you never know. You're taking swings a little bit in the dark, and you're like, I hope people dig this story, or
Yeah.
they enjoy where we're going, because I think it'll be really fun. If anything,
Yeah.
if the story sucks, it doesn't matter, because Zermanica will make it look great.
He does make it look great. It's incredible.
He does. And now it's become this point where I'm just like, I wonder what else he could draw. Like, like, now I'm like, oh, there was that scene in the graveyard in issue 2, and I was like,
with all the skulls and everything. Oh,
and I was like, I want him to
open that up. I would love to have a poster of that. That's how amazing that is.
I know. And I just thought, I bet this is going to be so cool. And then it comes back, and I'm like, and I just start laughing to myself. And that happens all the time now. Like, I'm like, I wonder what this page is going to look like when
yeah.
And so there's a little bit of like, and I had this with Fernando a lot too, on the Flash. When I'd work with Fernando, he would just blow my mind. When I did the wrestling issue with Fernando, I was so excited, because he could translate the stuff in my brain, and he would get what I saw, but then he would make it just 1,000 times better. And so you don't get that all the time.
Yeah.
And so to have a relationship, or at least a working relationship with somebody, and the way that I write generally is like, I want the artist, it's a visual medium,
Oh,
like,
it is.
I want the artist to have fun drawing.
Yeah.
And I want,
actually, they're telling a part of the story too that you can't put in a bubble, right? So
they're doing most of the work. Let's be honest here.
It's amazing. Yeah. I mean, how often are you having a conversation with him, and how does that back and forth look like between you two? Because I think as a writer in comics specifically, the art does have to tell a portion of the story that you just can't put in words, because you're limited, right, by panels and by everything else that's going on.
We talk every once in a while, and I do try to reach out and figure out what do you want to do?
Yeah.
What do you want to do, and how can I incorporate it? Because I want him to be having fun. I don't want him to just be like, I'm having a blast.
Yeah.
Like, that would be totally unfair if I'm just having fun.
Yeah.
And then I'm very rarely the guy that's going to be like, oh, you did this wrong. You know what I mean? Like, I can do the Marvel way. If it's like totally like a little different than the script, it's like, well, how can I fix it so it's not?
Exactly.
How does it here? And that's one of the things I absolutely, I can't tell you how much I love about comics, because in screenwriting, a lot of times you'll write a script, you'll get notes, you do the notes, you write the script, whatever, and then it's out of your hands and it disappears, and you don't get to see it anymore. With comics, you get so many bites at the apple. Like, the honest truth is, I'm not the best at grammar, and I'll write something fairly quickly, but the fact that I get art back, I get a lettering pass, I get like a final pass, I get to make little tweaks along the way, really just makes me feel good about the process. But with Germanico, I'm very different, and he's so exacting, and he cares so much. I have so much respect for people that just care so much about what they're doing. Like, on the Mortal Kombat movies, I appreciate it. Like, Joel McHale would be like, he would be present in the moment. He wouldn't just read the words. He would go, Jeremy, this is a dumb line. Like, I've heard better, and it's like, oh, okay, he's here, he's listening, he's trying to make it better. And like, to have a collaborator is really great. Zermanica will do, I added 3 panels here because I thought it would be good. And it's like, great, or what do you think about this layout? Or these 6 other versions of that layout? And I'm like, Zermanico, I can't dress myself. you
Yeah.
pick because you are the genius, you know.
Yeah.
So I try to be very deferential because at the end of the day, you open up the before you read the words. Oftentimes, you're looking at the art. For me, anyways. I mean, as a kid, it
Yeah.
was like when I saw Jim Lee's art, or John Byrne,
Yeah.
or McFarlane's, or Liefeld's, when X Factor, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I was that's what got me into a book. If it was Kevin McGuire or Amanda Connor, like I
Yeah.
was probably going to read your book. You know, it probably didn't matter necessarily what the words were.
Right.
You know, so I feel like I have an important job, but I also just want to have I want to make it's a big investment in my mind,
Yeah.
and I want people to pick it up and be like, oh, that was worth it. Like that was
Yeah.
worth
Yeah.
it, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, is there the possibility down the road that Jeremy does something on his own? And have
Yeah,
you already created stories of and characters and everything
yeah,
else? Yeah.
yeah.
Is that something eventually you want to get to? I mean, obviously
Yeah,
you're very invested in what you're doing now, but a lot of really amazing writers have gone off to, not that they've left DC or Marvel. We certainly, as a fan, don't want you to leave DC, but it would be
yeah,
really interesting to see what Jeremy could come up with outside of DC
yeah,
without continuity, to create his own characters, his
yeah.
own world. I mean, that'd be a lot of fun to see.
Yeah, I have a lot of I mean, listen, I'm a screenwriter in LA.
Yeah.
It's like I have a backlog of
Yeah, a lot of stuff,
a
huh?
lot of stuff.
Yeah.
There is a lot of you know, like I was telling you, there's a lot of fear that like, oh, I'm going to do it, no one's going to read it, or no one's going
Yeah.
to buy it, or you know, and comics are weirdly expensive to make.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and you want to be able to pay people
Yeah.
properly,
Absolutely.
and there's weird red tape. So I will tell you that I'm working toward that.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I'm going to be doing a couple other books that are not DC
Oh, okay.
that aren't mine either. But
Yeah. Yeah.
um, I'm really kind of hungry to do more comics,
Yeah.
and so I'm excited about that. There are two projects with two different companies I'm going to be doing. One's going to be announced very soon,
Okay. Cool.
and then this my creator owned stuff. I have a bunch of stuff I really want to do.
Yeah.
I just I got to figure out how to pay for it.
Yeah, no, for
you
sure.
know,
I mean, you see
you
what
know.
like Scott Snyder's done, and he's
Yeah,
done
I mean
some
those guys,
incredible stuff
yeah.
outside of, yeah, and
But
he's
they're
one of my
also
favorite
Scott
writers all.
Snyder, and they're Tynan, and like I'm like, oh, you know what I mean? Like I don't
Yeah.
think I've reached that level of like notoriety enough. Like I would, the worst thing would be for me, I would feel like I would go, hey, uh, help me with this Kickstarter, and it's like
Yeah.
you've made $20, and I'd be like, oh, you know, like I'd be so sad. I'd be so sad about it, you know.
Yeah, that'd be depressing. Yeah.
And then you also want to make sure you do it in a way that like you can get it done in a timely manner so that
Yeah.
like a year from now people aren't like, hey buddy, I gave you $20 last year and I haven't
Yeah.
seen anything. It's like, I'm sorry, you know. I don't want to do that either, you know.
Yeah, no, that would be no bueno for sure.
No bueno. No.
So how about Comic Cons?
Yeah.
You seem to be fairly active. What's coming up for you in the next couple months? Where
Oh
could
my
people find
gosh.
you?
So I'm going to Edmonton, the Fan
Hmm.
Expo in Edmonton
Oh
this
wow,
Friday, and
nice.
in October I'll be at New York Comic Con. I'll
Yep.
be at Dallas, like a fan expo thing in Dallas, and then
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to a thing in San Francisco in right after Thanksgiving in
Okay.
November. So this has been my first like full year of doing conventions, and it has
Yeah.
been much to my wife's chagrin, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I've had a blast, and she's just like, it's more FOMO. Like she wants to
Yeah.
be, you know, because I landed in Philadelphia, and I'm like, yeah, I got to go run up the Rocky Steps. Like, you know, like there are
Yeah.
things, places
I
I've
saw
never
those
been.
pictures. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a total nerd when it comes to that stuff. So
Yeah, for sure.
I love going to places I've never been,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
my favorite thing is meeting the other professionals that do it. Like that's been a thrill for me. That's been so much fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. How about
And then
LA? Do you do LA at the end of the year in December or no?
oh yeah, that's
You gonna
totally
be
true.
there?
Yeah, so I'll be at LA Comic
Oh,
Con,
sweet.
and then I almost always do WonderCon, and I almost always do always do San Diego.
Yeah.
Um, and then yeah, besides that, I have a Lego Jurassic Park thing coming out this fall. I have a Mortal Kombat animated Johnny Cage movie coming out in
Nice.
October, and Yeah, man, it's busy times.
Busy. Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well,
You have
Jeremy,
to
man,
be.
what's that?
You have to be.
You have to be. You have to
Yeah.
be. Well, I can tell you on behalf of a lot of folks that really love Green Lantern, we're super excited for you to be
Oh,
on the
thanks.
book. We're excited to get into issue 4 because of that interruption that we had. Because I feel like you got off the ground, but
Yeah.
maybe you held back a little bit, knowing that Night Terrors was coming, and then issue 4 you'll be able to just push through and
Yeah.
to dig into the story a little bit, right?
Issue 3 comes out when we're at the time of this podcast tomorrow. But yeah, and people were like, it was funny, like somebody was like, we need the story, and I'm like, we're only on issue 3. Like,
yeah,
I'm like,
really?
3. like really, it's only been 3 issues. Like, give me a break. I'm getting there, I promise. Like, I wanted to actually hit. I don't want it to just be me just shoving stuff on the page. I want it to
exactly,
you know? So yeah, you're right. By 3 is pretty important to the plot moving forward, and 4 we get a little special guest star, and by the end of 4 things get really crazy.
Nice.
By the end of 5 things get really crazy. At 5 it's like, oh crap, you know.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Well, we're super excited. Jeremy, I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for joining me. Huge fan of your work. Can't wait to see issues 3 and beyond. And man, if there's ever an opportunity where you want to share more of what you're doing, we'd love to have you come back. But I had a blast talking to you, and just thank you, Jeremy. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Have a good one, Mr. Jeremy. We'll talk soon.
All right, bye.
All right, bye.